would it be possible if we could like have this minimized just so we don't see our reflection when we're speaking? Because like
it's really
good idea. Yeah.
Just like
The delayed one as well.
No, that's a good. That's a good idea.
I didn't realize how much I moved my hands until I just saw.
Oh yeah, no, I had to watch myself like right there, just sort of like zoned out, staring at my computer. Not nice. Okay, thank you. Okay. Welcome to round 4. Today's motion is, hold on.
This House would introduce performance-based pay for teachers.
Yes. Okay. Speaking times are 7 to 8 minutes with POIs between the 1st and 7th minute. So 1 clap at 1 minute, 1 clap at 7 minutes, 2 claps at 8 minutes. For high speeches of 4 minutes, so 1 clap at 3 minutes, 2 claps at 4 minutes. Cool. Any questions? All right. With that, I welcome up the first affirmative speaker to open today's debate.
Issue 1. Teachers aren't getting paid that well in the current status quo. Issue 2. Teachers aren't performing that well in society currently. In a world where AI is nearing its peak, it's so easy for teachers to override their skills in teaching for the easier route. But how can we fix this? Firstly, we would like to create a model for this motion, and then I will go on to my 2 substantive points on quality and quantity, and secondly, the incentives and how we incentivize multiple affected parties. So firstly, on our model. When we look at performance as teachers, we want to judge based on the productivity of their work. So we look at grades for students in that certain classroom. We also look like how time efficient they are when they're handing assessments out, like grades. And we also look at the levels of feedback that they're giving to the student, because on our side of the house, we highly value that in teaching performance, because we believe that the student is the biggest outcome in this debate. And so we think that the feedback that a teacher gives a student is usually how a student becomes more better or becomes more able to take that and into other areas of learning. We also see that the actual action of this model is that we would likely have 1 lesson or 1 day of observation of the week by the lead of faculty, head of faculty, and we see that as not a like a pre-perceived thing. So the teacher that is teaching will not know when this would happen, which means that they just have to perform well all the time, which is just a good thing. We also see that we also would like weekly reports of the self-performance, because we would like to see where both the head of faculty and teachers stand with that. We also want to look like who the teacher is teaching. So we look at students and how well they cater to them. So things like disability students or cultural and how they implement that in their teaching material, and also people with language barriers. Keep in mind that there are classes that dedicate their work to language teaching, which is also something that the head of that faculty can acknowledge. We will also say, like, in terms of numbers, we want a 20% increase for the salary, but we would check this every 6 months, and clearly that is up to the head of faculty plus the deans and school kind of head of the schools to be able to identify that. I will take a POI.
When you say that there's a 20% increase in salary, what exactly do you mean by that? Because that's unclear. Like, is 20% maximum or?
20% is the max, yes. And then we would say that on obviously of how they are performing. But firstly, on our first substantive point on why our side of the house has quality and quantity, 2 very important things. So firstly, in context, we see that teaching quality has kind of hit an all-time low, especially with ChatGPT prepping lesson plans every single week. And the first make of this is that firstly, it's just a bad thing because it lessens critical thinking, as all teachers tell their students, and creates reliance, which as a teacher should not be happening. But why does our side improve this? So A, we see that with the knowledge that you're getting paid based by your performance, you are highly likely to increase your quality of work, even when you don't get the highest, even if we don't get the highest quality teachers. 1, the improvement still matters in this debate, and 2, we get quantity as well. So moving on to quantity, firstly, we see that teaching is an entry-level job, and the only barricade is probably money and stigma, because that's kind of the highest things that are encouraged in teaching. And so when money is being raised, and when that starts to enter the equation, people are more likely to pursue this career. And even if it's like shallow to become a teacher because of the pay, we see that people that have a passion for teaching also benefit from this. So we look at people that want to be a teacher but don't pursue that career because they know that teaching doesn't pay very well. Therefore, they are more likely to go into a degree that will get them like a more better pay in terms of career. So we think that this actually helps people revisit their passion and actually pursue teaching. So obviously, for the impact of quality, when it is improved, we see that kids become more engaged in their learning because they know that their teacher is actually making sure that they are doing what they need to do and doing it to a highest standard. And we see that that's just intuitively a good thing because we want the kids to be able to be more engaged, to be able to produce better work. And we also see that, secondly, teaching becomes rewarding because the effects trail onto the students. When you are a teacher and you see that your student is succeeding because of your lesson plan, because of the feedback you are giving them, that gives you catharsis. Secondly, we see that the quantity is improved as well. This is also a good thing because many countries need more teachers, and especially in New Zealand, where we see that that is a current issue as well. On to my second substantive point on why the comparative is worse. Wait, no. Why we incentivize different parties. So firstly, the money incentive. When the money incentive is there, it just makes teachers produce better work. When the teacher is working harder, a student generally works harder as well. And due to the high quality of work, we just get better students, which is a good thing. We also see that teachers are using shortcuts in order to hand in work, like AI, which is one of the biggest problems because it just lowers work quality. But moving on to the government, we see that the government cares a lot about students because they are investing in them. They are investing in teachers to invest in students to be able to come right back to them. So they are the future voters. They are future workers, which contribute to the economy. We also see that education is extremely important because it's part of the government goals. Most of their policies are based around education. And by having harder working teachers, we just better educate kids, which at the end of this debate is probably the most important thing. We also see that when a teacher gets the incentive of money, they are more likely. Yes. So this looks like handing in more detailed feedback, handing in work on time, encouraging students to work harder because that just allows them to be more attentive. And the impact of this is that students just have more like care into their work, and they also see that when your teacher cares, you are likely to also care about that. You also build more connections with your teacher when you realize that they actually care for you. And I think connection in a school environment is very important because you can take that into the wider world as well. We also see that teachers generally feel more happy when A, their students like them, and B, that they're getting more money because of the hard work that they're putting in. But lastly, on why the comparative is worse. So on the comparative, we see that the child-heavy incentive of teachers can be unpredictable. We see that some teachers may give up or purposely produce low-quality work with a what's the point mentality, which is a bad thing. And the first mechanism of this is that they are more likely to put out lower quality of work for more often. And that kind of leads to less teachers overall, which just worsens students because of the lack of teachers. And lastly, I would just like to weigh a few things that we've said. So A, we look at quality of teachers. Why do we weigh this so highly? Because better quality means a better student and better education. Not only that, but it actually creates a whole wider school culture, more better, and it just allows the school to feel more proud in both their teachers and their students. I think it's pretty intuitive that a school would like their education to be highly noted and also have a nice connotation without any negative impacts. Then we look at the quantity of teachers. With this incentive to pay based on performance, you are getting more teachers due to the money incentive, which is a good thing. And lastly, engagement and education of kids. We just get better teachers and hopefully smarter kids. So lastly, our best case is that we get more quality in teaching and we incentivize teachers to work more attentively. And our worst case is that teachers who don't perform well, they just leave, which is better because now they don't have to pursue a career that they're not well trained in or doing well in. Proud to affirm.
I think this is the speech, and I will come up past the game to open this next.
4 things for you this speech. Firstly, a little bit of setup, then moving on to a large some rebuttal to the first speaker, which I'll mainly group under the category of time and money. Then moving on to our 2 main points of the impact on students and the impact on teachers. Okay, so firstly, a little bit of setup. The key stakeholders in this debate we believe to be are the teachers and the students. This is blatantly obvious. It's teachers, the students who are being taught and the teachers who are being paid. That's why these people are the ones who are affected most by this, as well as. And within the status quo, the pay system works. Just to clarify, because the opposition did not say this, within the status quo, the way that the pay works is that it's based on experience years and it's based off of additional responsibilities taken on by the teachers. For example, management units. So on to the main bit of rebuttal. So the first forum speaker talked a lot about how we're going to give the teachers who perform best, who are getting the best performance reviews, getting the best grades, a 20% increase. So we on the Getting team first want to ask you, where is this money coming from? Where is this 20% increase coming from, such that you can give that, you can take this money and you can give it to these teachers who perform well? No, thank you. And we're also seeing that that this money. So firstly, this money must fell off. We don't have unlimited budget as a government. And secondly, we're seeing that many of these mechanisms that you so want to implement for this pay system regard on using up valuable teaching time, valuable time that the head of department, for example, which you said the head of department will come and conduct a review of all the faculty within their department at least once per week. That takes up valuable time of that teacher, which could be used for actual teaching of the students, and takes up time, and they might have to hire additional staff, which just costs more and more money. Where is this money coming from, we ask you? Secondly, in terms of that rebuttal, you talk a lot about how, this teacher, again, the teachers there are going to submit self-performance reviews. Again, this just uses up time which could be used for actual teaching, for lesson planning. This is just adding additional admin on top of things which is going to be ultimately ineffective, as we will prove to you across our points. And the rest of the rebuttal through those points will be integrated throughout my speech. Okay, so on to the first main point on the impact on teachers. So with our teachers, they have the following incentives. They have the incentives of pay/money to because they have families and they have needs and costs in lives. And they have incentives for students because they want the students to learn, they want the students to learn, and they also care about the students' well-being. But ultimately, teachers are human, right? They have to make money to live. Ultimately, teaching is a job. They need to support their lifestyle. They need to be able to. They'll act for the students' interests when their own interests are covered. And ultimately, on the status quo, we also see that inflation and things that aren't being addressed in the current union negotiations are getting 1% or 2% pay rises for 4 years of work, for across 4 years, and that just ultimately isn't keeping up with inflation. So we're also seeing monetary stress on these teachers. Okay, so two mechanisms within this. So firstly, your model on how you do this creates a cultural competition within the workplace. So this means that teachers are paid directly dependent on the pay of the other teachers in their school. Well, firstly, actually, your model fails on the fact that it doesn't compare it on a national level because it's being done by faculty inside a school, so they can't actually compare across the national level, which means you can't standardise anything. And the government needs standardisation in order to pay the teachers fairly across the board, and that just doesn't work under what you have proposed. So this is bad with the fact that the teachers pay direct dependence on other people, because it means that it creates an environment of hostility between teachers. One teacher's being able to make rent might mean that one teacher might not be able to make rent because another teacher is outperforming them. It just creates a discontent between the teachers, and it means that within the staff room, for example, which is going to be active hostility, people won't be able to make friends, people won't be able to feel safe in the workplace, they'll not be able to engage with other people because they're ultimately in a competition. And it's also it's difficult in the workplace environment due to just this hostility. And so that means that some people might get a decrease, and some people might get a pay decrease, some people might get a pay increase, and it's at the harm of someone else. So ultimately, it's just going to create this sense of competition. Okay, so a second mechanism of this is subject differences. So some subjects are harder. Some subjects won't have grades that can be easily compared to other subjects. Like comparing art and calculus, that's not something that's really easy to do. And we also see that these markings, which can be more subjective in subjects and less in others, and it's impossible to standardize these subjects. So your model just fails there as well. And this means that teachers from one subject might get paid more on average, and that means there's going to be a shift in the balance of teachers, and ultimately one subject is going to end up being unrepresented under what you've proposed. And thirdly, there's already a lot of stress in the teaching space, and this change will just cause additional stress. Because currently with the rolling of the new curricula and the new assessment forms, teachers are already in a lot of stress, and what we're going to see is that all of these changes and all this pay and all this struggle is going to lead to worse mental health for the teachers, it's going to lead to more stress in the teachers, it's going to lead to less friendships, less ways to mitigate workplace stress, and ultimately less people are going to want to become teachers because they see these harms, they see these stress in the teachers, and we're going to lose all these teachers that you are so intended on keeping, but you can't keep them under your model. And that's what we on the Getting team believe. These teachers have less happiness. Now, on to the second point, the impact on students, these are learning stakeholders. So, schools are places for students to learn. This is our primary concern in the well-being and the education of the students, as well as the teachers. So we recognise that the students have different ability. Okay, so four mechanisms under this point. First is that the students are less incentivized to support. The teachers are less incentivized to support more difficult students. So this means that some teachers who are going to be teaching more lower ability classes are going to suck up the pay cut because they are going to ultimately have to lower grades, which is ultimately going to impact how much they're going to get paid under your model. This is going to build resentment between students and teachers, and students who perform worse are going to be placed at a further disadvantage. There's going to be an extinction vortex of grades for these students because no one's going to want to teach them because it's going to have pay cut and they're going to be taught poorly, which means their grades are going to get worse and worse and worse. And this also impacts lower decile schools really highly because it means that their grades are just going to get worse and worse and worse as a whole, which is like an extinction vortex of the grades. Okay, so second mechanism, students are going to receive less quality education because this is just going to encourage teachers to teach to the test, not to the actual content that they're meant to be teaching. Teachers are going to teach the grades. And ultimately, one of the things he said was a faculty check-in, and we're not going to know when this is going to happen, but we can see that faculty, when the head of the department walks into the room, they're not just going to ignore them sitting in the back. You're going to know when you're being assessed, and if that's the one time a week where this valuable head of faculty time is being used up, in order to see it, they're going to teach one good lesson, and ultimately they're going to use AI to submit the feedback, and ultimately we're not going to be able to see anything. I'll take a POI now if the opposition wishes to offer.
You stated where this money is coming from. Don't you think the government would be incentivized to fund this, especially because we highlighted the importance of the future generation to the government? So aren't they most likely be the ones to enforce this?
So ultimately, we believe that if the government wanted to pay the teachers more, they would be doing it right now in status quo. We don't see why there's any difference in your world. It's symmetrical across both sides. And so we see that, just continuing my point on the students receiving less quality education. So students are going to get less quality education because the teachers are teaching to the test, not the content. Teachers are just trying to get better grades, look better in their performance reviews. And ultimately, that means the students are going to learn less stuff. Okay, so the students are going to be encouraged, actually more likely to cheat because teachers are going to want to turn a blind eye to people who do using AI thing because it means that their grades get better and it means that they're going to be paid more because these teachers are incentivized by pay ultimately because they need to be able to make a living. And they're also going to be less pastoral support because in the opposite case, when teachers hyper-focus on the teaching and they're actually focusing on we're either going to be incentivizing cheating or we're going to be hyper-focusing on cheating, which is going to be less pastoral support, which means less student well-being because these students are going to be supported less because we're seeing all these teachers focusing on the curriculum rather than making sure the students are okay. So students are going to burn out, students are going to face stress, they're going to be bullied, etc. And ultimately, this means that students are going to receive less quality education. Students are going to receive less support on the pastoral level. And ultimately, this leads to less student satisfaction. This leads to less student happiness. This leads to poor education outcomes of students, which means they're going to be less able to contribute to society, which means they're going to be less likely to make a livelihood, which means they're going to have a poorer future. And so ultimately, in the status quo, we believe that we have better outcomes for students and teachers, and that is why I'm very proud to stand.
I think this was the first speech, and I welcome up the second and final speaker to continue this case.
It's like right up in your face.
Note that, on their side of the house, they haven't presented any reasons as to why just not paying them, this extra 20% would be beneficial. So, even if you didn't believe everything that we told you at first, nothing changes on their side of the house irregardless. But you should believe everything I'm about to tell you. Let's go. Two things I'll do for you in today's debate. First off, let's respond to everything they've talked about. And second off, let's talk about my split, the educational gap. I'm so happy, proud of decile schools. Anyways, first off, right, so what do they tell us? I think, we can summarize their case into a couple of points. First off, on the rebuttal, I'll respond to that first. Secondly, on the impacts of the teachers, and thirdly, on the impacts of the student. So, what do they tell us in their rebuttal setup thing, right? So, they tell us that a couple of things. The main thing I want to respond to is oh, where are you getting the 20%? Oh, where are you getting this money? Bear in mind that we set up for you at first that like not everyone's getting 20%. We're not just handing out money out the walls. We obviously can't do that, right? But I think Selena has told you very explicitly, hey, the highest raise that you can get is 20%. That just means that not everyone's going to get 20%. So it's not like this massive, like, oh my gosh, we're going to throw millions into education. But even then, even if we did throw like millions into education, I think that's still intuitively really good because again, these children are your future. These children are your economy. If your children and your staff are dumb, your economy is bad. All right. But also, right, they talk about like, oh, you know, we don't have the time for this. We don't have like, oh, all this time that is used on like these assessments and like the paid thing, whatever, we could be using teaching, right? But we see that actually, like, even then, it's also symmetrical on theirs. Not symmetric necessarily, but that occurs also on their side of the house just because like they have less teachers, right? So they're going to be using more time into this thing, right? But it's also like a short-term, long-term effect. Like, yes, in the short term, you might like be wasting time, quote unquote, but in the long term, we give you these impacts. We get better quality teachers. We get more teachers, and more teachers therefore means that you're just wasting less time, which is an intuitively good thing, right? I will take a POI before I move on.
Do you believe a government that won't increase union pay by 1.9% is the same government that's going to be willing to pay some teachers potentially 20% more than their current wage?
Bear in mind that's New Zealand specific. This motion never grounded this thing in New Zealand, right? This can occur to anywhere, right? Even if you don't believe it occurs in New Zealand, it can occur in other countries, which we still think is an important thing, all right? Now I'm going to move on to the impacts of the teacher. What do they tell us? Well, they tell us that, one, that there are two main incentives to teaching. One, money, two, students. We agree. Obviously, we agree with the characterization that, like, hey, I need money to live. That is just, like, a pretty, obvious thing, right? But then they also tell us that, like, oh, because we're raising the pay, there's going to be, competition among the teachers. We're not decreasing anyone's pay. We're not stealing your $2 and giving it to the other guy down the road. That's not how that works, right? The only competition that you are having, as we've stated at first, is literally just yourself, right? And also bear in mind that, like, these people, these are adults, okay? They have a certain level of professionalism to maintain. They have a certain level of maturity because, like, even if you don't believe that, like, oh, they're jealous, they're not gonna act out in some, like, harsh way, like, ah ha ha ha. I've put paint all over the other guy's slideshow, right? Like, that's not some villainy cartoon Sunday thing that they're just doing, right? We think at worst, right? At worst, this jealousy is just, like, internalized. But even then, that can be a good thing because then that's an incentive for you to do better because you want to be on the same level as these people, right? But secondly, they talk about, like, the hostility within it. And again, Secondly, they talk about, like, the national level and how this is really bad because, like, you can't compare it to the, like, oh, every school cannot be compared. Bear in mind that, like, not every school is teaching at the same rate. Not every school is teaching the same material. Not every school has the same resources to teach the same exact thing. So, yes, it shouldn't be on a national level because it's unfair for these poor students. It's unfair for these low decile schools that don't have the resources, that don't have the means to get better education, right? And to pay these teachers even less, these already broke people even less because of the resources that they don't have. It's inherently bad. Yes, I will take that.
Do you believe, really messing up here. Do you believe that if it's not on a national level that it's going to be easy to give a 20% to the teachers that deserve it while also not having a standardized version that kind of fits all schools?
Yes, actually, I do believe it will be significantly easier. Why? Because instead of, like a council of people looking at, like, 20 schools. It's going to be, like, at best, 5 people looking at your singular school. You know these students. You know these kids. You know your subject, right? Like, bear in mind that this isn't, like, a crazy concept that needs, like, oh my god, like crazy amount of time, crazy amount of money, right? So then, what else do they, so then, another thing they tell us on teachers is, like, oh my gosh, it's, calculus is going to get paid more than arts. Bear in mind, at first, we tell you, again, head of faculty, unless the head of faculty is arts is also calculus, I don't see how this stands in this debate, right? And again, and finally, the last thing I'd like to respond to before I move on is, like, oh, the stress, and there's less incentive because now I'm stressed out. Bro, I'm stressed out because I can't get paid. I'm stressed out because I can't afford pencils. I can't afford my house. Can't afford no mortgage. Like, at best for them, this is symmetrical. You're gonna have stress either way. Living is just freaking stressful, man. Right? But second thing I'd like to respond to is students, right? So, what do they talk about the impacts of students? They tell us that, mainly they tell us that, there's less incentive on the teachers and to help these students because, they're dragging down the grade, whatever. Would you not think that there's more than that words are hard. Would you not then think that there is more of an incentive to help these struggling students because they dictate your pay? You're not going to leave them high and dry, because if you leave them high and dry, on the best case, you're getting paid $2 less. And listen, $2 buy me nice pie, right? But anyways, I think that I can flip this point and tell you that actually we get more incentive for these struggling students for these teachers to help these struggling students because they dictate such a portion of their life, such a prominent thing of their life, right? And then again, and a couple things they have to tell us. Oh my gosh, the decile point. Wait, no, I need to leave that for the educational gap. I'll tell you that later, but bear in mind it will come, right? Anyways, the teaching for grades. The second thing they tell us, oh, you're teaching only for grades. Bear in mind that in the status quo, teaching for grades literally dictate everything. Grades dictate whether or not I get into uni, whether or not I can get a good job. Yeah, is it a good thing? Oh, but that's not what this debate is about. It's about whether or not these students can get, good jobs, can get out of the cycle, which they can through grades, because that's just how the world works, right? And then they also talk about they're gonna use AI feedback, but bear in mind that AI is just not that good at writing. Have you seen those AI stories? It's and for once, that was enough. Literally, that's all the feedback's gonna be. It's just gonna be you did really good impacting, and for once, that was enough. I will take that.
Aren't you aware that AI is really good at writing the kind of stuffy reports that you would be expecting from teachers?
Listen, I don't know if y'all know this about AI, but the amount of Oxford commas they just be using wherever, whenever, and the really long dash they just be using every other sentence. Listen, I think especially if you're head of faculty and you're looking at a report, you know how to search out for AI, because one, you experience, two, it's your literal job, because you look at AI assessments from students all the time anyways during moderation, right? So, oh my gosh, educational gap, let's go. All right, so let's talk about the educational gap and how this is significantly beneficial for people. Oh my gosh, I got to speed run. Context is that poor people are less smarter because they just have less resources, right? That's the two thing. I don't think I have to prove that, right? But oftentimes, it also just means that there's less teachers in these schools because they can pay less, because the state is paying them less or whatever, right? So a couple mechanisms to the point. When you add this money incentive, one, poor communities get these teachers, they get these resources, they get these educational people, and secondly, these teachers have the means to buy supplies for their students. So what does this mean? This then means that these poor decile students, that the negating wants to claim that they care about. Actually, it's been a lot outside of the house. Stand with broke people. Think yourself you're going to continue that point.
Okay, I take the speech and I welcome up the second negating speaker to continue this debate.
What do you do with a sick chemistry teacher? If you can't heal him and you can't cure him, you bury him. 3 things that I'm going to be doing for you in this speech. First of all, talk about discrepancies with the affirmative teams model. Second of all, talk about impacts that we're going to see on our major stakeholders. And thirdly, my substantive contribution, which is going to be how there's no one-size-fits-all method for determining how well a teacher is doing. So first of all, with the affirmative teams model. First of all, we've heard from them that this isn't really in a New Zealand context, and so it could be anywhere. And while we think that we agree no one has said it's in New Zealand, I feel like asking, Western Sahara, Libya, Cuba, etc., all these countries that might have bigger issues on their hands to increase their teachers' pay by 20% might be a bit hard. So let's just keep this in the context of New Zealand. And also, it hasn't really been said what age level we're dealing with, but we're going to be charitable and assume it's for primary school kids. So we've heard from the affirmative team. This is going to be based on students' grades. Let me repeat that to you. This is going to be on students' grades. And so this is where we see a lot of harms from students coming from, which we gave you at first, but I'll go over again soon. Also, they tell us that teachers are going to be observed one day a year by the head of department, and that's going to determine their time efficiency, and they're not going to be told about this. But I think it's pretty obvious when your head of department walks into a room that that's what's going to happen if they stay there for the whole lesson. So I think that while a teacher might not they might put a little bit of work into making sure that their lesson doesn't look like an absolute rubbish heap when the head of department does come. They're not necessarily going to be making every single day of the year incredibly impressive and everything. So we don't think we're going to see that much of an increase in how well they're teaching with that regard. Also, your head of department, you know them kind of well. There is potential for cheating. There is potential for corruption of the system. And there's not too much of like monitoring at a government level, we see that perhaps this is, head of departments might be like, oh, I like this person. Oh, I'll just say they did really well because, they did. And there'll be a lack of clarity for these head of departments as to what exactly they're looking for, because, it's different across the country. It's different in certain subjects, and people might have, certain different standards about what they think is time efficiency. And finally, we've heard about these feedback sheets that teachers need to be giving to their pupils. While feedback is important, I think that this bureaucratic need for feedback being given to students in writing is going to put so much strain on teachers. And we hear from the affirmative team they're just going to hire more teachers to fix this. First of all, they're already blowing the government budget, but now they're going to hire more teachers as well. And secondly, we see that this is going to put heaps of work on teachers. Even if there's more teachers, you're still having to write quite a few feedback sheets. And we tell you teachers will probably turn to AI because, AI writing is a bit distinctive, but if you're smart enough to pick out M dashes, you're smart enough to get rid of M dashes. And so either teachers are going to be way too stressed in doing these by hand, or they're going to be doing them by AI and accomplishing absolutely nothing. Yep.
Wouldn't the same restrictions that stop students from using AI still happen to teachers when they use AI as well?
Well, if you're a student, you get monitored by teachers, but teachers have a little bit more freedom because they're not being as closely monitored. So I think it's quite easy for teachers to even pull out, AI on your phone, on your home account, and then type it up onto whatever document you're doing. Secondly, about money in terms of model discrepancies. So all we've heard from the affirmative team is that the government is going to want to have good education. I feel like most governments try to prove that they want good education. However, the amount of money they're expecting us to blow is absolutely exorbitant because, we understand that not all teachers are going to be getting this 20% pay increase, but presumably a relatively high amount will get an increase because otherwise teachers will go, oh, that's too hard, I can't get a pay increase, it's absolutely unattainable. So we ask, where does this money come from? Especially because I mentioned before, we're going to be hiring more teachers. So this is going to take it away from other teachers or else other more important sectors, for instance, healthcare. Where are they going to be getting this from? And we also told you that the government has been struggling to give teachers a pay rise recently. We've had quite a few days off due to that. So I don't think that the government is going to be willing to hand out that kind of money, especially with all the economic concerns of the stage. So moving on to the impacts of this. I've got two impacts. First on teachers, second on students. So on teachers, the affirmative team tells us they've got a better incentive for students to get good grades and to learn well. There's such a thing as too much of a good thing. Think about it. If you're a teacher, you're about to give your students, a spectroscopy internal where they need to figure out what the mystery molecule is. What if you slipped and let them know what the mystery molecule was and they all got an excellence? That would look really good on your grades and that would allow you to get higher pay. See, we've told you at first, teachers are going to be teaching to the assessment, not necessarily improving students' general understanding of a concept, but making sure students do well in the assessment. And so we see that there's potential for that. Even if you're such a good, honest, hard-working teacher, you're probably not going to be putting that little extra effort into something that they won't be assessed on. And then secondly, this is hard on the students. Do you really think that teachers aren't going to kind of say to students, hey, my pay does depend on this? But even if teachers don't say this, we see that students are still going to be aware of it, still hear of it in the news, and be aware that they're directly impacting their teachers' pay. And so, therefore, the teacher might turn a blind eye to cheating, or they might not be taught so well before tests because the teachers just want them to pass this. We especially see this with internal assessments. NCA is not lasting too long, but you know what I mean. And so what we see is students who graduate school and they're not prepared for uni, they're not prepared with the critical thinking because their teachers have kind of milk-fed them all of this stuff. And so therefore we see that students actually, they might make it to a uni with good-looking grades, they're going to struggle at uni, and we're going to have people less prepared for all of the important things that you get from uni, such as, doctors, lawyers, etc., all the people who are absolutely intrinsic to a well-functioning society. So we see that at the end of this, when we look back, that teachers are going to be having a really rough time. There'll be competition between teachers to get the best classes with the best students, best grades, etc. We see that teachers are going to be overworked, and we also see that for students, this is going to put a huge amount of undue pressure on them when they're already at quite a stressful point of their life. So moving on to our substantive point about how there's not really any one-size-fits-all way to assess teachers in terms of how well they're doing. And like, for instance, we see if this is based on grades of the teachers, the affirmative team doesn't really give us a large amount of framework for what this looks like. So if you think of a teacher wanting to, thinking of working at like a low decile rural school, the affirmative team cares a lot about low decile schools. But when teachers are being paid based on the grades, when they're being paid based on like how well they can control their class or time management, they're not going to want to take up work in a place where the students don't care so much about learning, or the students don't have the ability to learn, or maybe they struggle to focus in a classroom environment. So they're not going to want to take up those jobs. And we see that, therefore, teachers aren't going to want to take those jobs. They won't be so happy about them. And also in terms of like when people are being observed by the head of department, I had two amazing maths teachers in the last 2 years. One of them was kind of just gave us the work, told us to do it, explain it through. The other one danced while teaching us calculus, and they were both exceptional teachers. I don't think that the government is going to be able to really strictly manage this. So proud to affirm.
I think this speaker for this speech, and I welcome up the shadow coming speakers to the University of States.
Two clashes in today's debate. Firstly, surrounding will this incentive work, and secondly, on the second clash around the impact on the students. But what do you tell you around this financial incentive? We tell you that teachers generally want money. Teaching is generally an underpaid career, and we tell you when their work is being monitored, they're more likely to perform better. I feel like that's just inherently a true thing when you're being monitored. I feel like that's very easy to prove on our side of the house. Generally, for example, when students are being monitored, they're more likely to try their best, they're most likely to do the work and not talk because they have that restriction in the first place. I feel like, and we also tell you that the government is probably willing to fund this because the future generation is very important. The opposition may say that the government doesn't want to do this because they're inherently greedy and don't want to lose money, but we already highlighted you from first that the money they're making back is that now the future generation is probably going to be more educated, and at the end of the day, the future generation is the people that's voting. Those are the people that are working the economy. Those are the people that they want to have the highest paying jobs, so they feed more into the economy. I feel like it's very viable that the government probably wants the best interest for the future generation. But we also tell you that incentive is a really strong thing, especially for money. And we tell you that because when you're able to give more money to these teachers for performing really well, I feel like it's very good to believe that they'll actually do perform well, and they'll actually be much more organized into work, like handing in assessments on time and handing in much more. But we also tell you that our model has like limitations that I feel like the opposition has kind of overlooked. I feel like we tell you that this performance is there's 5 barriers of there's multiple barriers on where this teacher can be graded. It's not just the in real life spectating, because I feel like it's very true that the teachers can just be making up. I feel like that's something that a head of faculty would probably know. But we tell you that the productivity of work is a really big factor that it probably comes into this. We tell you that the head of faculty is incentivized to do this because their job is to also look after the teachers that are under this faculty in the first place. I think those are things that are a part of being the head of faculty, and especially a teacher that is probably acknowledges that they have to look after these teachers in the first place. Therefore, they're more incentivized to actually look over the productivity of the teachers under them did work. What does this look like? It looks like them handing in the assessments back on time. We already told you the example of moderation. Head of faculties also do moderations between all their the whole team of their department. I feel like it's very crucial that they see, okay, did this person give back all their drafts that they marked off on time? Normally, the head of faculties normally do a lot of group stuff. I feel like it's very easily to monitor that, especially when you're a part of that in the first place. But we also tell you that We also tell you that we're taking kids' learning into consideration. Like the students that you're teaching is probably going to be a very big consideration, and the information is very like easily to access, especially with kids being monitored all the time, like past report cards, or maybe like their home teachers, or maybe if they have like special needs. I feel like they already have like marked on their like student profile that they are like have this like negative like impact. I tell you that like the subject that you're also teaching is probably going to have like a big intake on what you're doing, and like the teachers the students that you're teaching as well. So I feel like we're able to confirm that there's probably going to be entries of barriers, like what it takes to get this incentive of 20% higher like pay rise. And because of that, I feel like we're able to prove that not all teachers will be getting this because of how many barriers they do have to pass in the first place. So I don't think it will be that big of a big government financial strain that will impact them very detrimentally because there's so much things they have to verify. But what did the opposition tell you? They tell you that it's a waste of time that you are sitting in, that the head of faculty is sitting in and watching in the back of the class or analyzing like the teacher's self-report, because that's generally bad, because that head of faculty could be teaching the kids instead. We tell you that at the end of the day, even though they're not teaching kids directly, they're monitoring the self-reports. At the end of the day, run back and impact those kids at the end of the day. We tell you that everything is like very chained and locked together. We tell you that because those teachers are taking those times to self-report, to monitor, and how we already proved to you that when a teacher is getting monitored, they're most likely to produce more productive work. I feel like you're able to confirm that, like, because the teacher is there, taking the head of faculty, taking the time to do all these precautions, they're more likely to impact the students beneficially. But what does the opposition try to tell you as well? They tell you that competition between teachers and it causes like no teachers to be friends. I feel like we're able to prove that teachers have some sort of professionalism. Like teachers, like every job has the professionalism. I feel like you can't just like hate on a teacher because he just get paid more than you. I already think there's like a stigmatization of being jealous of another person's pay in the current status quo, especially in the real adult world. Like I'm not gonna be friends with you because you get paid more than me. I feel like that's a very like not really a good like reason that like a teacher would not be friends. And I feel like the average adult with common sense who's lived a life of trials and tribulations would probably acknowledge that in the first place and probably not just be the loner sitting in the corner because like you didn't get that 20% pay rise. So I feel like that is very like unlikely to be true. They also tell you that spoon feeding. I feel like our model, like spoon feeding kids material, I feel like our model kind of rejects that, like spoon feeding, because we also talk about how a kid has improved in the certain like states, like have they improved to a certain degree. I feel like that was kind of overlooked, and I feel like spoon feeding is kind of like already rebutted by that, by saying that I think like spoon feeding is like been a thing that's been for ages. Like spoon feeding has always been a tactic to get good grades. I feel like once you're handing out 20% like 20% bonuses, I feel like spoon feeding kind of gets like not something that a teacher wouldn't do, because if you're just getting automatic A's out of nowhere, I feel like it's very easy to flag, especially because everyone is gunning for that 20%. So if someone finds out that you made like the F student into the A student, it's kind of like very bad. But they also try to say that you're now teaching a kid for tests, not to actually understand the subject. But to pass the test in the first place, you have to understand the subject as well, especially to get like a high grade. I feel like that is teaching in itself. At the end of the day, you are like learning for that final NCEA exam to get the credits, not the credits, like get the verifications that you need. And at the end of the day, if they end up teaching just for the test at the end, as long as they're passing that test, and to pass the test, you do have to have a high level understanding. At the end of the day, what's wrong with that? I don't think the opposition really highlighted what's wrong with that. But at the end of the debate, what should you probably believe? You should probably believe that the government has the best interest to make sure that their future generation has the best education as possible, because the most educated civilians that you have, the more money that is feeding into the economy, the more people like getting high-paying jobs, the more high-paying jobs you have, the more they contribute to just global, like the way the world works. I feel like those are very important things that the government and like how we've been proving to you. Secondly, we've already proved to you that there's probably going to be barriers, because a 20% thing is something that's not very low. Like people find it very important and should be kept until a check. And I feel like we already proved to, I'll take PR.
Can the opposition provide us a single concrete location where this money is actually going to come from?
Pardon? What did you say again?
Can the opposition provide a single concrete location where this money is actually going to come from?
Where this money is going to come from? Probably the Ministry of Education and their kind of areas. And you know where we can get that money? The new future generation we just built up, because they're contributing to the economy. That's where we can get the money to pay the pay rise. So,
I feel like at the end of the day, yeah, we've already proven to you the first thing. Secondly, that teachers are probably going to be better. And now moving on to the benefits of students. We tell you that we get better quality of students because for a teacher to be better quality, and now they're incentivized to do more efficient work, that automatically runs off to the students. I think there's a direct parallel. I don't think we need to do much more work to prove how that occurs. But we tell you that when we make teaching a more more lovable job, like people are more inclined to do that. I feel like teaching is a very love job, but we already proven to you that it's kind of neglected because of how less they pay. We already proved to you that this pay will occur. So when that pay is there, there's more likely people to teach there. And at worst case, that's our best case. But at worst case, if you can't meet up to the standards, if you can't compete, then you shouldn't be a teacher in the first place. We just take away those teachers that never fitted into that area. And so that's and negating, they gave lack of benefits for direct students, and yeah.
I think their speech, and I welcome up the third negating speaker to conclude the substantive portion of today's debate.
I'd like to go over a couple points within this debate. I'd like to start with where is the money coming from? So we initially took you at your best within your argument. You at no point have been able to tell us where exactly this money is coming from other than stating at your last speaker that it is coming from the Ministry of Education, but not being able to specify where specifically in their budget this is coming from. To take money, you have to be getting an increase here, you have to be taking in a decrease here. We took you at your best case scenario where we assumed realistically the budget is not going to increase. The ministry has a set amount of money they are willing to spend on education, and you cannot just say, oh, well, what about the future? We'll go into that a little bit later, but we took this team at their best and assumed that an increase for some teachers must realistically result in a decrease for some teachers. So when we're talking about what a decrease in pay looks like for some teachers, we talked about how this creates a competition between the teachers because we understand that to increase the pay for some teachers, we must decrease the pay for other teachers because this has to come somewhere out of the budget for teacher pay, in which case there has to be a decrease. We see that with this decrease, we see a lower job satisfaction. We see competition between the teachers where there is not this friendly element. You are not able to be friends with your coworkers if you are also trying to beat them, if you are trying to steal rent from them, because we understand that in this world where our cost of living is so high and where teachers are paid so very little as is, that difference of that little extra pay increase or decrease could be the difference between eating that month. That could be the difference between your kids having a good education themselves. So we see a very heavy impact on teachers where they are because we recognize that being a teacher is already a very difficult job where you're expected to take on so much more than your job it technically requires you to do. You're expected, as the other team mentioned, to buy things for your classroom with your own money as the other team put out. This is entirely unrealistic. Teachers dedicate so much of their time and their lives to their students, and you're expecting them to put in more work and to do an increase of already insane admin just for a chance at an increase. So we would like to take a look at, is this realistic? So we first would like to point out that the government has a specific amount of money they are willing to spend on education. This will not increase. The other team has provided a reasonable argument, well, they believe it to be reasonable, about how realistically the government wants their future generations to be more educated. However, we would like to argue that it has been pointed out time and time again by our teachers' unions that if they have an increase in funding, there will be an increase in education, and the government does not care. So we believe that it is unrealistic that we expect the government to suddenly change their personality and suddenly believe that education is super important and they should be fueling these future generations. We do not disagree with the idea, however, it is not realistic for what our current government is going to do. They've also used a circular logic in saying that this funding is also coming from these future generations that currently do not exist, we do not believe this. So when we're looking at, is this realistic for our current government to do, we say no. Our current government is not willing to do this, and it is not going to happen. We do not see this as realistic. So what we are seeing, I'll come back to this later, but I'd like to go into impacts on students as I discussed impact on teachers. So we have mentioned that we are teaching to the tiers, not the grade. The other team has said that's a good thing because grades are good. We have brought up time and time again how different subjects maybe have different metrics for grades, and different grades and different subjects look different, and it cannot be standardized.
And going back to what I said earlier, we took this team at their best when we assumed that this would be nationally regulated, because a teacher that is really good at one school might not be as good as a teacher from another school. So we took them at their best and assumed that this would be nationally standardized. However, they said that this will be done internally within schools. We take an issue with this being done internally because we believe that there are so many different biases that can be done from this being done internally. And also the excess of admin that must come with this. Why are we doing an excess of admin work for no reason if this is not being done at a national scale? So we see that it is not possible to have a reasonable increase of 20% when each school is going to be grading their teachers differently. If the government, even at their best case scenario, if the government was somehow willing to fund this, which they are not, best case scenario, if they are willing to fund this, where are they going to decide if two schools are saying that their teachers are both the best teachers in the world, which one are they giving this 20% to? That can't happen. They don't have the money to do this. It's not nationally standardized. We took them at their best. We were charitable and assumed that it would be, and they disagreed with us. Time and time again have we been charitable with this team. We assumed that it would be New Zealand. We assumed there would be a decrease. We took them at a national level, and we assumed that it would be judged via grades, which is another point that I'll get into. However, this other team has repeatedly denied this and has only made their case worse. So we would now like to go into a little bit about how the other team's system itself does not work. So the other team has talked about how there will be an increase of admin. There is so much extra work. There is so much extra work for head of faculties. There is so much extra work for teachers. And there's also some work for students who are already under pressure for their grades. So they talked about how this is going to be feedback from students, feedback from teachers. They're going to be judging this in so many different ways, which in their minds and in their at the best case scenario creates a bunch of different levels in which we can see that we are not judging them by a one-size-fits-all standard, which we agree can in some cases be good. However, we disagree at the amount of admin that needs to be done because of this. Teachers have a lot of work to do. Do you want teachers to prioritize teaching their classes, or are they trying to write specific reviews? Head of faculty are busy. Do you think they have time to sit in every single classroom of every single teacher for all of their subjects? Every single class, not just one for each teacher. Keep in mind, because they might be better at teaching some grade levels than others, so how are you supposed to check that? This is unrealistic for the amount of time that a faculty administrator has to put into this. It's unrealistic to expect a teacher to be doing this much paperwork per week. It is unrealistic to assume that students will be able to give entirely unbiased feedback on their teachers. That's not how that works. Students are biased, sorry to tell you. So we see that there is an issue with structurally, at the best case scenario, where you are creating multiple barriers to entry to get this pay increase. You are also creating a world in which you have this increase of admin, putting more stress on already stressed teachers, which we do not believe is realistic because it is just too much work. It is so much increased work. And we would now like to go on to, lost it. So it's just so much admin for no reason, for no benefit. And so we've talked about does this work realistically? No. Does this work on a government level? No. Does this work on an internal level? No. Because we can see that from school to school, each school is going to be thinking that things are different, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry. We can also recognize that no government individually will have an incentive to do this because governments are not in power for long enough to see this coming back to them, even if you take them at their best with their future generation argument, which we do not believe is realistic. Just because you have more people educated in the future does not mean that you're automatically going to get more money for education in the future. There's no correlation between those two things. Correlation does not equal causation. Sorry, man. It's not happening. So on this team side, they've essentially said that teachers aren't leaving. We're going to be having more teachers, which we don't believe because we believe that there will be an unfriendly work environment, which we believe we have proven through the competitive nature of these pay increases. We also believe that there will be, because we believe taking them at their best, there will be a decrease in pay for some teachers, which we believe does not incentivize anyone to become a teacher. We also believe that we have very clearly proven how at their best case scenario, a world in which everything that they have works, we are taking money that the government does not have to put into education to make teachers do a super huge amount of work. And I'd now like to go into another small point about realism, where they've said that not a lot of people are getting this 20% increase. However, they also said people are going to be really, really incentivized to try and get it. So we believe that on one hand, if not enough people are getting this 20% increase, that it's not going to realistically be enough. There's not going to be enough of a chance for a teacher to be able to get it for them to significantly increase the amount of work they do. The amount of work that you would need to do throughout the year to be able to get this pay increase is so monumental versus the chance that you're going to be able to get it, which is so small. However, we also see that if there is a higher chance of them getting it, it is a higher burden on the budget. So we believe that we have very clearly won, because either way, no matter which way you take it, there is either a huge burden on the government or a huge burden on the teachers that does not work. We believe that we have very clearly proven why it is a harm to teachers, it is a waste of money, and it does not work and is ultimately illogical. Thank you.
versus speaking order, and I welcome up the executive to close out the Zoom steps.
Yeah, late.
What do you get that those reasons? Go and check that. One thing the affirmative team has skirted around again and again and again is where the money is going to come from. They make really good politicians. So, what do we see in this debate? We see basically two main areas of clash between the two teams. The first of all, about where the money's coming from, obviously. The second of all is going to be our impact on teachers and students. And this has kind of been clumped together because obviously there's a large amount of relation between these two. So, where is the money coming from? We heard, as Charlie told you, we heard very late on that it's going to come from the Ministry of Education. Okay, where is the Ministry of Education going to get it from? And also, as Charlie said, we haven't really heard, we've heard also that heaps of teachers will be getting it, enough that they're incentivised to think they could, but also that not many will. So it's kind of unclear about how many people will actually be getting this. But we're going to assume it's still enough to cause a significant financial strain on the government, because that's the only way it'll be enough to get a significant financial interest from the teachers to want that. So we believe that we could win alone just on the fact that this is so ludicrously expensive. However, this is also backed up by the complete ineffectiveness of it. So we've told you about how this is going to encourage teachers to teach their students to the assessments, to maybe encourage them to cheat, maybe not even on a massive level, but to kind of drop little hints about the upcoming assessment, etc. And while we still believe that it takes some effort from students and they have to be good at it in order to do well in their external exams, we see that, even internal exams can boost up the teachers' overall grades. We see that in most NCEA courses, internal assessments give you the majority of your credits. But even if this isn't true and teachers don't outright make their students cheat, there's still going to be stress on teachers and students. How? Well, there'll be friction between teachers because they'll both want the better classes that'll get the better grades, or the subjects they find more easy to teach, or the year level that they more gel with, so that they can look good and get this extra pay. And also there's going to be more stress on the teachers because they're going to be having to be filling out all these paperwork, etc. So even if they're better teachers because they're giving good feedback, or they're incentivized to teach their students well, they're going to be so stressed they're not going to be very effective at their job, and also they're not going to get much job satisfaction because of this friction we're telling you about between the teachers wanting these certain classes or year levels, etc. And how about the students? Well, the affirmative team doesn't care about them because the students are going to know that a lot of how they perform in their exams is going to be determining how much their teachers get paid. And even if you're a classic teenager who probably doesn't care too much how your teacher gets paid, you're still going to feel a little bit of stress from them. This might look like them putting a lot of pressure on you on them, etc. As we've told you, dropping hints, constantly talking about it. And this is quite a crucial time in their lives where a few of them will be stressed anyway, because as the affirmative team told us, it's important to get good grades, to go to a good uni, get a good job, etc. So they're going to be more stressed at this already stressful time. Therefore, we see that any of their projected benefits of the system aren't actually going to happen because the teachers won't be teaching effectively. There'll be so much stress the students can't do their exams well, and that they're actually just harming themselves by doing this. So if I take a step back, we see that there's not going to be any money for this and it's going to be ineffective. But even if you take the affirmative team at their best case and there's no cheating, and the teachers are still not overly stressed, we see that there's still enough of an increase in stress and expenditure that they're not going to see a marked enough increase in student performance in the next few years to be able to account for this.
I thank the speaker for the speech, and I welcome up the back to close out today's debate.
I am really glad that negating thinks I would be a good politician. I think that's a beautiful compliment because as a politician, I would like to impact my society in a very positive light. How, as a politician, would I do this in this current motion? We want better quality teachers. We want better incentive for teachers to help struggling students and more quantity in teaching. Even then, existing teachers have an incentive to do better or they drop out, which is also a good thing for our side. So on our case, we prove that teaching is just an important job as a doctor. Their job impacts important people and shapes people. So our benefits and impact on that weigh much more than the negating team. And neg doesn't actually show many benefits of keeping the pay the same. They don't actually show how beneficial that is. Whereas on our side of the house, we prove that this change actually creates change. We also prove that this is a better way for students to excel and also for teachers to excel in their job as well. But firstly, we would like to say that we actually prove in first, second, and third that we gain more incentives from teachers, students, and the government, which is actually quite important in this debate, seeing as we would like to finally mention that it is coming from the government, that invites change whether or not it works. I don't think negating shut these incentives down effectively enough, though. But when we look at negating's case, we look at, I think, maybe three things: time and money, students, education, and possibly fitting into the teacher's extra work. So firstly, let's look at time and money, but time specifically. The head of faculty doesn't have enough time. But when we look at the wider scope, when you're investing into something that actually changes A, your school, B, your students, and 3, your teachers under your faculty, that should be highly weighed in this debate. And we think that our model actually changes this and creates this change. I also don't think that, observing one lesson every 6 months is a really big thing. And I don't think that it actually uses much time at all. And also, I would just like to say that head of departments actually already do observations. So why is it such a big difference in our model? I just don't see that coming through. And then we also look at how in students, negating has said that we don't care about students, which as a politician, I would hate to say that. And so I think that we want connection, we want improvement, and we want good feedback from teachers in order to support students. And for teachers, this just looks like emailing them back, maybe not an hour after, but also, we would like to just stick onto the grade thing. Negating really believes that we want every single student to be excellent across the board and excellence on every single exam. But what we're actually looking for is improvement. What is improvement? It is when you're constantly sitting in some sort of area and then gradually growing in terms of work. So we can see that maybe in your working out, in your math. We can also see working out in other areas. And so their push is that teachers aren't going to actively try and teach the concept, but we tear this down because of the incentives listed before. Teachers intuitively want their kids to perform well. And so we actually create this change. There's zero change on the negating side, and at best things are currently good and stay the same, but let's just see that it's not currently good. And so our best case is that yes, teaching quality is better. Yes, teaching quantity is better. And yes, the government is investing into something good. And just on extra work, the only thing that's added that's extra work is the weekly report, which is something already seen currently in the status quo. In New Zealand, especially since we want to keep it in New Zealand. We see that in effort and progress reports. Why is it so much harder to write a report on how you're doing? As a teacher, you should be reflecting on your work. And I think it's actually positive for them to be able to do it. We also see that we know that they are capable, and as well as teaching well when you're being observed shouldn't be extra work. I think it just should be intuitively good. And that is why I'm so proud to affirm.
Awesome. I think this speaks for this speech. I thank both teams for a great debate. I invite you guys to cross the floor and shake hands. Good job.